Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here from the Child Protection Party. Now, I've been very hesitant about how to go about this discussion tonight, primarily because I've been really angry over the last few days. I've had stuff happening in my head that has driven me to have a couple of sleepless nights, to wonder and ponder about what we're doing, how our society is turning out, the issues that confront all of us. And then, like this rally that was held on Saturday in some states, not all states. And there's a few things about that. I think I was distressed that when we've tried to hold rallies around kids in the past, we have had 20, 30, I think the most we've ever had is about 50 people turn up. I went to one rally where there was about 5 or 6 of us all doing our thing. And the best rally I think we ever had was when all the politicians, as they were, me, I wasn't included in that, even though I did speak, but I wasn't a politician, but where we stood and we talked about the issues concerning kids. But we had a rally on the weekend where there were some, thousands of people in Sydney and thousands in Melbourne and a few hundred here, but I think they got washed out in Adelaide. And I wondered, who cares? Like, we have these rallies because people are complaining about being locked down and they're feeling disgruntled because they believe their freedoms are taken from them, and a whole host of other reasons. And I know that I understand the concerns that people have, I really do. And there were a mixture of sorts of individuals within each rally, and some of them were those people who they were people who had a variety of reasons. So some people were concerned about their freedoms being taken from them, having to wear masks. Others were concerned about their livelihood. Some were concerned about their recreational activities and not being able to do all of that. And I think the ones that I felt most for were those people where their livelihood has been cut for some particular reason. And I became distressed, not only because we work really hard at CPP in order to get as many people together to discuss issues around child protection, and I very rarely would sit before you and talk about anything that I believed was controversial. But today I am, because I have my own fears about where this country is going. And I'm just concerned because, we've had a situation in the US where the right wing have got hold of, firstly, the political party, the Republicans, and secondly, they decided through Trump to have an insurrection on January the 6th. And I'm not suggesting that anything like that will happen here, but I'm kind of fearful from a few things that I've heard over the weekend and some Facebook pages that I've watched, where that is where we're heading. That there's such a discontent in our society around what lockdowns mean, what wearing masks mean, what being vaccinated means, and the misinformation that I believe has been spread is harmful. And that particular group of people that believe that are, I think, swelling, that there's an increased interest in those particular issues. Now, my issue always has been around child protection. It's always been about making sure that in every aspect of a child's life, they have the opportunity to have the best possible outcome that they can. But I'm concerned primarily because people don't seem to be too concerned about that. One of the issues with CPP has been how we're going to provide a world in which our kids can survive. that provides them with the best possible outcome that they can. The coronavirus tends to have made that appear a little bit more dismal than what it would have been normally, and that we might have to live with having to wear masks and under restrictions and all those other sort of stuff for some time to come before the virus is completely under control or before everybody is vaccinated. And I get angry at those people who want to put us at risk. Real angry. I'm angry at the people that say that they care about kids, yet are prepared not to accept the medical advice that we're offered, who question everything, who suggest that for whatever reason we should be following the Constitution, and we're not, and that there are certain elements of our community that believes that someone said, just recently I watched a video and someone had made the comment that we should get hold of all our politicians and lock them up, and that we should do citizens' arrests. So there's this sovereign citizenry crap that is permeating many people. There'll be many people that will be watching this today who will be aligned to many of those beliefs. And I need to let you know that I'm here to express my view, that I'm not going to denigrate you around yours. You're entitled to have your view. I disagree with it. I think it's garbage, but that's fine. Let's just agree to disagree. But I'm being honest with you about my views and my concerns. You know, a speaker who I'm going to talk about in just a moment suggested that two things, that we should have peaceful demonstrations. Absolutely agree, and I really thank him for having said that. The other thing too, at the end of his speech, he also said that there will be chaos, that there will be kind of like a civil war, and he's predicting by December. So there'll be this uprising of people, and that they need to buck against authority and challenge authority at every possible level. Now, I don't disagree with the notion about challenging authority. I think that most of the work I've done for most of my practice has been about challenging some authority in some form or another. It's kind of what I do. It hasn't made me popular, but I haven't cared. So I understand challenging authority. But we're in the midst of a health crisis right now, and we're in the midst of a mental well-being crisis. We're in the midst of an emotional crisis. And if we're feeding those notions about the fact that this is going to destroy us, and that we're sort of these hopeless, senseless individuals who are at the whim of governments who just simply do not know what they're doing, and that we as the citizenry need to take government back, I often ask myself, well, what in the hell will that look like? So what's the ultimate plan for these people? If they're going to take over the government, they're going to lock up politicians. Like, how do you do that? That whole notion is so out of the realms of possibilities. It's in fairy tale land. Yet there are so many people who believe these views. And I'm concerned that those views will eventually take over and they will govern us. And that in the end of the day, that if that becomes the majority, we're in trouble. And I don't want my kids growing up, kids grow up, my kids are growing up, my grandchildren, I don't want my grandchildren growing up with a sense of fear. There's enough fear out there in the community as it is, just around this bloody virus. But we're elevating that virus into another stage altogether. We're making it appear to be that everything that is said around coronavirus is in itself toxic, because the people that are making those declarations are not making them in our best interest. I'm not suggesting for a moment that any of those views are correct. I'm not saying right now that they get it right all the time. But you know, if I have a medical problem, I want to go and find the specialist that's going to help me. I'm not going to walk up to somebody, or maybe a few specialists that might be able to give me an idea as to how to deal with the difficulty. I'm not going to say to them, well, I don't think that you're right. I'm going to listen to Joe Blogs down the road because he's got a good blog that talks about this stuff and that he's the kind of expert. You know, there are people in our community who have put a lot of effort into being who they are in order to be able to provide us with the advice that they need in order to keep us safe. To dismiss that is arrogant. To dismiss it puts all of us in danger. Now, I don't know how long I'm going to talk to tonight because I'm not interested necessarily. I was going to say I wasn't going to look at it. Whiskey says, no one under 16 to take the drug. This is the absolute truth. Do something, CPP. I don't know what the hell we're supposed to do. They've changed the Otago, I believe, have changed that advice in terms of 40 through to 16. I don't think we have a declaration yet as to what's going to happen for children under the age of 16. But I'm sure that something will happen, and we need to face the facts. There have been some stuff-ups. Our government has stuffed up. There is no doubt that Scott Morrison, in my opinion, needs to be voted out at the next election. His party needs to go. I'm not 100% convinced that Labor is the alternative either. I don't. Both of them are almost as bad as each other. And I just need to say that I don't have any great faith in politicians. None at all. I believe that most politicians there, because they see it as a power struggle, they see it as a place that they can go in order to enhance their own ego and who they are, and build a profession for themselves that's going to mean that when they leave, they'll have all these other wonderful opportunities sitting out there as well. I get all of that, right? I don't trust the bastards. I don't. But I do trust our legal system to do the right thing. If we have an issue with the legal system, then we can find ways to challenge it. I mean, much of the work that we do here at CPP is trying to devise policies and practices that are going to enhance people's lives. That's what we do. What we need to do is get people to listen to that so that changes will be made appropriately. We had one success not that long ago in terms of therapeutic foster care. So people will listen, people will take note, and there will ostensibly be changes which we need to celebrate. We have a voice, and our voice is for kids and for families. But we can't go around espousing ideas which are simply unhelpful and are inoperational. That some of the things that are being talked about in our community are going to breed further fear on kids. Like at this particular meeting, which I think was in Newcastle, one of the speakers was talking about stuff that I thought children should not hear, about the fact that authority itself was damaging, that the police should not be listened to, should not be heard. And I couldn't help but think, if these kids grow up amongst all of that, and later on they're out there and they get confronted by a copper, and they decide to disregard that policeman because their parents have told them that authority is bad, and that they clout that police person, and then they wind up in jail or they do other stuff because they're bucking authority all the time. I just think that's so unhealthy for kids. I really do. But no, this is the sort of stuff, and one of these persons is someone who is advocating for kids. Now, I have a great deal of respect for this person. I just need to put that out there. And I'm going to have a look at some of his work, if you like, in a moment. And I'm doing this because I have invited this person to have a conversation with us at CPP. And he refused to. And I don't feel bad about it. This isn't about having a go at him because he didn't come to... I don't care, really. It was just an offer. And he refused because he thought that I was a politician. And I just want to be clear, I am not a politician, just like I'm not a lawyer or a psychologist or an accountant. I have no degree, no qualification. I haven't been elected into any position. I am not a politician. I simply run and look after and organise and work with a whole group of other fantastic people in order to try and put ideas across that are going to help you. That's what we do. I will become a politician if ever I get elected into Parliament. But until then, I'm just working for you. Hopefully, if I get elected, I'll be working for everybody as well, whether you voted for us or not. And we'll be working for kids. But I need to be clear. We need to understand this. I am at this point not a politician. No one in our party is a politician. We simply have a political party. We're all working together for these outcomes for you. So that was his objection. and which is fair enough. He's entitled to that particular view, as wrong as it is. He's entitled to that. But so amongst this turmoil of all these people that belong to this sovereign citizenry, he sits as one of them. And now, I don't know whether I said this before, but I'm here to respect everybody's views. Your views can be as bizarre as they like, and as long as you maintain them as your view, you can talk about them, that's fine. But when you start to enforce those views upon other people, when you start to tell people this is the way that they should behave in accordance with your views, and people start to follow you, that is fraught with danger. We at the CPP don't do that. We'll give people ideas, we'll talk about what policies we need to develop, how we need to behave as individuals within the party and outside, and we work hard to do that. Our idea is to be able to change people's thinking so that their thoughts and the way they want to behave are more akin to where we're coming from. But we're not telling people to buck authority. Now, there's no one on this planet who resents what the Department of Child Protection here do, and FACS and DHS and all the other departments around Australia. No one resents more as a social worker and feels more offended by the way social workers work and the terrible decisions that they make. No one, I don't think. There might be. But at the moment, I'm just saying that no one feels more aggrieved about the way social workers, other people work, and the types of decisions that they make and the damage that they do to families. I've talked about this over countless times. And I just want to reiterate it. Because I think sometimes people believe that they're doing the right thing, whatever that is. And I'm not attempting to judge anybody either. I want to be clear about that. I'm just stating my view. And I hope it doesn't come across as judgmental. Because I find that in all of these people who are out there attempting to do the right thing, that there is an honesty and an integrity about it. Even though I may not agree with the process that they use, I still believe that all of them have an honesty and integrity. Now, I watched a couple of videos that I noticed on one of the Facebook pages, and I went to a YouTube page, and then suddenly I found myself down this rabbit hole, as I often do. And when I got down there, there's 2-part video on a confrontation that happened between a parent, her advocate, a couple of other people, I think, the child protection workers, and the police. And it was so confrontational that I felt it was the Port Noarlunga office, and they're not my favourite office. I've had lots of blues with them over the years, lots of disagreements about how we're working with clients and so on. But if I'm extremely honest, I have to say that I really felt for those social workers there. So they're a group of young women primarily. Eventually a supervisor came out who was an older woman. And they were calm. They were calm. It was the other people that were off their tree, and they were raising their voices and asking lots of questions. And one of the things that they do, which really fascinates me, is they want to know who everybody is. They want to know their names. But when you ask them who they are, they won't tell you. And it's like a power game. So if I've, for whatever reason, got your name, and if you're a police officer, I've got your number and your name, I suddenly become more powerful than you. And I can't see any point in all of that, and it doesn't matter at the end of the day. They're not going to take these people to court. They're just standing there, for Christ's sake. And if they want to know who they are and they're working with the kid, they're going to issue a report later on anyway. That's just the way it goes. But they play this game and they ask people lots and lots of questions. And the other people, to their credit, they just stood there and they took it. And I'm telling you now, I don't know whether I could have sat there. I'm quite a reasonable bloke under lots of circumstances. I've been in cases with the department where I've just wanted to throttle them, and I've kept my cool. But these people, these young people, no older than my daughter, who's 26, who is also a social worker, they just stood there, and they took it, and there was a sequence to that where the family, where the police and the social workers turned up to a person's property where I think they thought that this woman was and her child, and the police, to their credit, were fantastic. They kept their cool. They were talking to a bloke there who just had all the conspiracy theories under the sun and believed that the Constitution was the greatest thing on earth and that everybody in the world was contravening the Constitution. And, and I do admire, I tell you what, I do admire these people for the knowledge that they have acquired, ill-directed, maybe, perhaps not terribly factual, but I do admire the knowledge they've acquired in relation to the Constitution and where it stands and how their viewpoint is and where the contradictions are. But the police were fabulous. The social workers just stood around. I don't know what happened in the end. Maybe the kid was removed. But I'm sure of one thing, and that is there is nothing that they did that enhanced and helped their position if that child was removed. At the end of the day, the social workers rightfully would have thought, well, this is a crazy bunch of people fancying a child living in that environment. Imagine things that they're going to be taught about the world and how the world is. Not that I necessarily think that's necessarily a reason for removal, but I'm saying this is the way they would be thinking about you. And some of those social workers would have digged their heels in and said, we're not returning this kid, we're going straight for a GOM-18. All because, probably, of the way these people chose to behave. So they had an advocate there who clearly was one of these persons that believed in the Constitution, whatever that means. And was doing the name, who are you, what sort of stuff, taking lots of notes. None of it means anything. None of it. And I guess that's where I started. So when I was watching that video, which I think was Friday night, I was feeling extremely frustrated and sad because the opportunity that this family had to address whatever those issues were, and I don't know what they are, but to address whatever those issues were and to work to have a child back were gone. They pissed that off in the wind because of the way these other people were behaving around them. And I suspect that these other people are known as their support workers and their advocates. Well, this is not the way you go about it. You don't piss off the very people with the power and authority. But these people, the sovereign citizens, believe that that's their right. Well, it isn't. You might think it is, but it isn't. We need to find ways to work with these group of people so that we can achieve the goals that we require. So I just want to the person that I've been speaking about before is my mate, Paul Robert Burton. Now, as I said before, Rob Burton, I'd invited him to come and have a chat to us. The offer's no longer on the table, buddy, but it's no skin off our nose. Because I wanted to find out, because I believe that Rob or Bob, whatever he's called, is genuine in his need to be able to help people to understand what's happening within the child protection system. And I think many of his views align with us. And I celebrated that, and I wanted him to come along and have a chat to us. He's declined, only has one chance. That's it. So, but I was interested in who he was. I've heard of him for years. And there have been some people I've worked with over the years that have contacted Rob and haven't necessarily had good outcomes, I don't think. But there again, there are lots of people who can say the same about me, so that's not a criticism by any means. But I was interested in something that he said at a conference, at a meeting at Newcastle, I think it was, and that is where he talked about, and he's talked about this a number of occasions, where he has he's taken certain issues, as he puts it, to the Supreme Court. Now, he doesn't talk about what those issues are. And I was interested to find out what they are. Now, I'm not offering a criticism of him in this case, because I do admire the work he does. I don't like the conspiracy theory stuff, which, if you have a look at some of his videos on Vimeo, you'll find plenty there that contradicts, that is in complete contradiction to my views around certain things. But I do admire the work that he's done. So the issue with him, I'll just bring this up, and this is, I'm just highlighting this in case, because this is helpful stuff to know about him, and it's also helpful to know that there's much about this that I admire. And so he was suing the DPP and facts, and this is an interview. This is actually on the Sydney criminal lawyers who've got their own newsletter and stuff they put out. And this is suing the DPP and facts, an interview with Paul Robert Burton and Dr. Andrew Catalaris. And so I'm just going to read through some of this. You may be able to see it on your screen, I don't know, that I think is important to know and understand, because it's important to understand the work that Paul's doing, and it's important to support him, I think, around some of these issues that he's having to face. And I would support him around some of these, even though I have some issues, and we'll talk about that in a moment. A malicious prosecution is a tort, a wrong act that allows an individual who has been subjected to unjustified court proceedings to take civil action against those responsible for their groundless prosecution. The High Court set out in 2013's Beckett versus New South Wales that in an order to prove a malicious prosecution, it must show that the defendant brought the prosecution, that it was terminated favourably to the plaintiff, that the defendant acted with malice, and that the prosecution was unreasonable. So these are the lawyers setting out this case that sits with Andrew and Paul. So last week, there's filed a malicious prosecution against New South Wales Director of Public Prosecution, Lloyd Babb, and New South Wales Department of Community and Justice Secretary Michael Coates-Trotter, which they're entitled to do. And I can understand that. And if you're aggrieved enough and you can afford it, and you're going to represent yourself and you're smart enough, which I think is what Robert's doing, then that's fine. I get all of that. The plaintiffs are seeking damages over charges laid and subsequent dropped that related to the breaching of court orders. The pair had advised the senior public officials that the orders would hold, but the prosecution was continuing until the charges were dropped following a court challenge. Now, it is the interview. At the time the charges were laid, Burton was secretary of the Church of Ubuntu. Now, I don't know where he sits right now. I think he calls himself Pastor Bob. But the Church of Ubuntu, is the sort of place I would have gone to back in the early 70s in order to clear my head and, do my thing, I guess. But Dr. Catalaris was consulting for the multi-faith group. And today, Burton continues his fight for social justice as a minister of religion, a bard and a staunch human rights advocate. And I support all of those. I'm not necessarily a religious person. I'm an atheist. But they're his beliefs. I support them. While renowned medicine cannabis, so Dr. Catalaris was in trouble for providing medicinal marijuana oil, I think. Okay. So, but there's a conversation. So, this is the conversation I would have liked to have had with Robert Burton, but wasn't able to have. So, I'm going to give him benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to have him have that conversation with you now through me. Firstly, I've committed no crime and have never ever knowingly breached any court orders or legislation. So, I would never plead guilty to something that I have not done. Now, what he had done. I don't know if they mentioned it here. And the pair are the first people to be charged under Section 105 of the Children's and Young Persons Care and Protection Act 1998, which makes it an offence to mention the name of a child who has or is likely to be the subject of court proceedings or is or has been in state care. I'm interested in the has been in state care. I wasn't aware. That was news to me. I don't think that applies under South Australian legislation. However, that probably needs to be checked out. That's a bit crazy. My wife is 65. She was in state care. So does that mean she can't talk about her instances being in state care? That's crazy. That's stupid stuff. And if that's being challenged, go Rob. But But they did talk about, so I believe what had happened is that he had put on Facebook a case that he was working with, and the child was in state care, and he mentioned that child's name. Now, I don't agree with that. We here at CPP are really, really cautious about, and we tell people when we're interviewing you, we don't want to know about their names, right? You talk about the child or children, but you can't mention who they are because that's just inappropriate. The other thing too that just occurred to me is that if we can't talk about people that were in state care, many of the people who have their kids taken from them were in state care, so they can't talk about their circumstances. That's just stupid. I think that needs to be challenged, and Rob, I hope you challenge that and get away with it, because you bloody well should. So just want to read out some of what Rob says, and this is stuff that I agree with some of it and disagree with others. Firstly, I've committed no crime. Fair enough. He believes that he hasn't committed a crime. However, he's being charged with a crime nevertheless, and a number of counts. So I don't know what those counts are. I haven't seen any of the documents in relation to that. And that he says, and this is true, and I understand this, I was aware, along with thousands of other people on social media, that the removal of the child was unlawful, as the reasons stated for the child's forced and violent removal were known to be untrue, and yet facts still removed the child. So and I agree with that, because I've been in that position many, many times where we know that this removal is inappropriate, but the department has chosen to do so anyway. The child's family, and many other people, including myself, were violently assaulted. We don't know what the nature of the assault, but apparently they were. I'm assuming they're saying that they were assaulted by the department. I can't see how that happened, but anyway, that's what they're saying. I'm assuming, the child was at risk of significant harm, not because of the family, friends or supporters, but because of the poor decisions of facts caseworkers, who often make decisions to remove children that are not evidence-based and without judicial oversight. 100%, Rob, agree with you. Fabulous point. This is why I think that it would have been helpful for us to have had that conversation, which we're now not having. The removal was a warrantless removal under Section 43 of the Act, which, with all warrantless removals in New South Wales, the Facts Secretary has responsibility under the same Act to provide the court with reasons for the warrantless removal. Now, warrantless removal is a term that is unnecessary in my view. Part of the legislation in each state, reasons are given for the removal. I would agree that they don't have a warrant, but they don't need a warrant. Under the legislation, they're entitled to remove a child if they believe that child is at risk of harm. That is simply it. And there's an understanding until an investigation takes place. It's like arguing, this kid is living with a pedophile, being sexually abused every day, but we're going to take a while to get a warrant because, the judge is in bed, sleep, whatever, and we need to issue a warrant. Now, you can still only issue a warrant if you've got enough evidence to present to the judge that this is the case. Now, we know in the family court, for example, that many people have got plenty of evidence that these kids are being abused while in care with another parent, and yet the judge is still awarding with that kid. So even granting a warrant is a dicey issue. So I understand what he's saying about a warrantless issue, but it doesn't mean that the legislation is being contravened in any way, because you do need to remove kids when they're in harmful situations immediately. You can't wait until a warrant is or is not issued. You remove the child, then you do an investigation. I understand that. I do agree that we're removing a lot more kids than what we need to, but there are some kids that do need to be removed because of what they're experiencing at home. So he goes on to say, the court merely accepts facts submissions some parents have, in my view, next to no hope of getting the children back, with the emotional impacts being disastrous. Agreed again. So there's a whole host of stuff that I agree with him about. Just trying to find something. The draconian overreach of power has dire consequences for a system already in crisis. So true and well put. And although our court matters in New South Wales, this is talking about his own, they raise significant constitutional arguments at law that are essential protection in any assembly of a democracy. And this is where he starts to get into the sovereign citizen stuff. And this is where he loses me. Because he does fine up until a certain point, and then he kind of, in my view, trips himself up. But child removal should be an absolute last resort. He has here, in genuine situations of children clearly being harmed, not something decided by largely unskilled caseworkers with minimal qualifications. Don't disagree with that either. And Calara says his bit, and Burton comes in to say, so this is the issue around the charges. 3 of the 10 charges against me were dropped and 2 of the 5 against Andrew were. These related to alleged breaches of orders made under the current suppression and non-publication orders, whatever. The orders had been made during a closed children's court hearing in May 2017. So here he is today, still fighting these issues. Now, I'm not going to read any more of what he says because I've probably said enough. But the point I want to make is that there's much of what Burton says that I agree with. But I don't agree with the idea that we're living in a society that is so suppressed. You know, it was Churchill, I think, who said, democracy is not the best that it can be, but it's all we've got. And he's right. You know, our democracy can be improved, and hopefully over time it will improve. But to side with conspiracy theories which are groundless, which harm us and harm our children, in my view, is just wrong. And I disagree greatly, and this is the first time I've ever come out and said this stuff openly in a forum, because it has come to fruition. It's like a catalyst. It's just sort of risen to the surface over the last day or so, you know. And I had someone, and this is where I get so disappointed. I had someone who I admire greatly, and still do, and I posted something in something she said about the events on the weekend, and she responded to me by saying, well, no one, this is 3 hours after the event. No one's got COVID here. And I was thinking, okay. And this is the logic I do not understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. But, it was 3 hours after the event. There were thousands of people there. And I'm thinking, okay, did those people trot off all of a sudden and get their swabs straight away? And did they get the results within 5 or 10 minutes? Because that's the only way it would have worked, so that you know. And we're not going to know for a number of days now as to whether that was a super spreader event. And if it is, what will they do? They will blame the vaccines. That was the other one. The vaccines are causing the death of all these people. That's what's happening. And the sad thing is that, as disappointed as we are in Scott Morrison, his government, Labor government, they didn't do the right thing in terms of making vaccines available for those of us who wanted it. But they have done a reasonable job in keeping this country one of the safest on this planet. And instead of celebrating that and thinking how fortunate we are, I would have hated to have lived, like I'm 70, and I know that there'll be many of you that'll be very surprised at that, even though my wife would say, I thought you were 80. But there are, I wouldn't like to have lived in the UK or the US at this particular point of time. And so I guess what I'm asking is, can we just think about what this means to other people? Now, you may not agree with what I've had to say tonight. You might disagree greatly. You might think that I'm a bit of a moron, maybe, which is fair enough. But it's not that I really care what you might think of me. What I would like you to do is to think about how some of your actions may affect people like me of my age. I don't have any underlying conditions, but then a 30-plus-year-old young woman died yesterday from the virus. I guess those on the other side of the fence will say that was a made-up stat. It was one person, for Christ's sake, but one was one too many. Will that number increase? I had someone post to me that that from a very obscure right-wing site saying that there were 5,500 people who were vaccinated died in Scotland. And I thought, well, that's an interesting stat. I have to go and prove that one right or wrong. And I'm always open-minded. I think if it proves to be right, I'm happy to accept that. That's good. But when I checked, there were 7,790 people, or thereabouts, who had died from COVID in Scotland alone during the whole pandemic. So it was unlikely that 5,500, whatever it was, had died who were vaccinated, And there's lots of stats now in the US that proves that 99%, 98% of the people that are hospitalised are unvaccinated people. So are vaccinations working? I think they are. And are we going to do this to protect ourselves? So people who stand up against vaccinations, go for it. The rest of us will care for you. We will go and get vaccinated. We'll make sure that we're safe, that our children and our grandchildren are safe. All right? And I guess that responsibility is left up to those of us who believe that vaccination is the way out of this. And by not wearing masks, not getting vaccinated, not social distancing, you're putting other people at risk. And I think that's sad. Because most of these people that I know, such as Rob and others, are better than that. You are. You're caring, loving, compassionate, authentic individuals. And we really need to care for each other. Don't have to agree with us, but we certainly need to care for each other. So I want to thank you all for being with me. I'm sorry that it's such a rant and very long-winded tonight. I appreciate the time you spent with me. I'm not going to go through the comments. I'll do that later when I'm offline. But I just want you to know that we do care for you at CPP. Join us, become involved in our conversations about how to make things better in the way that we do, and take care of yourself. And of course, more importantly, be safe.